Hi everyone, and welcome to our short 15-minute video on Unit 519, Managing Quality and Continuous Improvement. I'm going to hand over to our tutor James, who's going to take you through the assignment. Thanks a lot, James.
Thanks, Charlotte. So we're going to talk around managing quality and continuous improvement just now. And um, just straight out the gate for this one, I think what I'd like to do is point everybody's attention to the command verbs that exist on this particular unit. So particularly, there's an extensive use of evaluate command verbs on Unit 519. Evaluate's a high taxonomical command verb, which means that when you answer the questions, it's expected you will come up with a reasoned judgment based on different opinions or different evidence on the thing. So please bear that in mind throughout when we're looking at these questions, of which there are many, that you are going to be asked to basically deliver a view or a judgment on what you think about the tools, the techniques, and the issues around quality and continuity improvement. So just to be really clear on that one, because it will be necessary to really apply that evaluation on those questions in order to pass this assignment. Generally speaking, just to give you a bit of an idea around how it's kind of an effective approach towards writing your responses. There are three kind of general rules. Firstly is the command verb that I just mentioned. So you should all have a list of the command verb definitions. If you don't, you can ask us and we can provide one, or you can pick them up from the CMI's own website. But knowing what that first word or two in the questions asking you to do is critical to make sure that you're successful in your work. The second thing is to lay out any core definitions of kind of key terms or phrases as we go through. And the final thing is to apply less is more, so that we're within word count. You'll have plenty of opportunity to apply each of those rules as you go through this assignment. It's a fairly decent sized one as well, with lots of questions. So let's get into this. So ideally here, we're going to take a look at overall around how we deploy quality and continuous improvement across our own organizations. But there are kind of a few ideas around that in terms of some of our challenges or opportunities around that we might want to think around. So the idea here is that you're going to understand the scope and purpose of quality management and have had a good chance to play with some of the approaches, tools, definitions around how to manage quality and continuous improvement and judge its success. That's the job at hand. We have, I think, 4 learning outcomes here in total, so there are plenty of different themes here to think around, and there are quite a few questions. So let's get straight into it. First learning outcome, we're going to understand the scope and purpose of quality management within organizations. Now, our very first question is to evaluate that word straight away, the scope and purpose of quality management within organizations. So here, the key thing is, I think, to make sure that you are providing an evaluation in your response. This is a reasoned judgment based on different evidence, different perspectives. So it's important that you kind of get to the end point of what do you think the scope and purpose of quality management is around organizations. There is some indicative content throughout as well, which helps you. You can use some of that. You don't need to use all of it. You don't need to use any of it, but it's there just to help to stimulate some thinking. Here, then, if I think it's useful here straight away to define quality management. So what you want to do is have a good definition of what quality management is to get this whole assignment kicking, because that's the kind of base of most of the assignment. So a definition of that would be probably where I'd start here to get the assignment moving. And then going to consider an evaluation of the scope and the purpose of quality management within organizations. And so scope might lean into the different places that you might see quality management, the overall areas where we might see quality management or continuous improvement as a thing. Then we might have the purpose as why do we do it? What's the importance of it? You might, as part of evaluation there, think around what happens if we don't have quality management as a nice contradiction to that, so that you've got a real good evaluation of where we see it, why it's there, in organizational context generally. And again, the indicative content there talks around managing customer expectations, compliance, efficiency, effectiveness. Business, you could have safety in there. You could also have, as part of your efficiency, you could talk around adequately managing for quality in the right areas, allows us to deploy our resources in ways which give us most value for investment, most return on investment. So, straight away you might think around quality not as just a maximum reduction of variation across everything all the time, into targeted areas where we're efficient when we have the right level of quality approach to different aspects of the organization. So that's what you think. What do you think the scope and purpose is of quality management in organizations? Here for 1.1. 1.2 is to analyze organizational structures for managing quality. Okay. Organizational structures then here would be where I'd start with your kind of definitions. So what we need to do here is identify 2 to 3 different types of structure. It mentioned this in the indicative content, so it could be departmental, it could be matrix, could be project focused, but you're going to look at some specific and different organizational structures, then analyze them each for managing quality. So how does a hierarchical versus a matrix organizational structure do in the job of managing quality? What the kind of things you see around there? The analyze command verb is a little bit different from evaluate, but it still requires a fair bit of depth actually. So the idea here is you're going to break this into different parts and examine each part in detail. You've got to identify the main issues and show how those are related to practice and why they are important. Any reference to current theory or research could support that analysis. So it could be if you can find information or data out there that shows that actually generally management, quality management works best here rather than here. That would be great to bring that in if you've got any kind of data or metrics that you can introduce here as part of that analysis. You could also use your own lived experience here and talk around how what you've seen in the past or current, what you think works the best, where it frays, where it works really well, that kind of thing. So we're looking at organizational structures now versus quality. What works, what doesn't, and what information data do you have to support that? 1.3, examine the influence of stakeholders in quality management now. So I guess this is who has power and authority over the way we do things. You could think around external stakeholders such as audit, health and safety executive could be one, or it could be things like CQC or other standards organizations, professional standards organizations. It could be shareholder stakeholders, politicians, what have you. So there's lots of stakeholders we might identify around the organization. And what I'd be tempted to do here again is lay out a number of different stakeholders, maybe 2 to 4 different distinct stakeholders across your organization or an organization. And then look for each of them, what influence you think they have in quality management in some detail again. So the examination here, the examination command verb, is to inspect the thing thoroughly in order to determine its nature or condition. So it's not enough just to list the stakeholders. You've got to really dig into for each stakeholder, what's their influence on quality management in the organization, do you think? 1.4 then, we're asked to analyze the impact of quality management systems on an organization's activities. Again, applying our rules of definitions, I'm going to suggest it might be worthwhile just defining what quality management systems are, the options available, just outline those here. We've got the same command verb of analyze, so it's the detail, bringing in some research or metrics or data if we can. And here we're looking at, for different quality management systems, what is the impact of those on the organization's activities? So again, indicative content here, that would include the policies, procedures, methods, standards, what standard work is, how do we, what systems do we deploy that actually changes people's decision making and behaviors in the real world. That's the kind of thing we're looking for here. So you kind of really trying to relate in the different systems into the activities. That's what we do, how we decide specifically, I think. And then again, if you can bring some data information into here to support that, that would be great. And again, you might want to think about some lived experience to bring this answer to life a little bit as well. Learning outcome 2 now. Understand approaches for managing quality. 2.1 and 2.2 both have an evaluate command verb. So let's start. What do you think about the thing? As a reason, judgment is where we're trying to get to with both of these answers. First one is evaluate approaches for managing and maintaining quality, both managing it and maintaining it. Again, I think the indicative content probably takes us through what we need on the whole here. So you've got your Lean, Six Sigma, total quality management approaches here. Okay. So these are general approaches for managing and maintaining quality. Your job is to identify 2, maybe 3 different approaches, maybe based on the list that you're given here in the native content or anything else that you're using that's different from that. And you're going to evaluate each approach. So this works really well as a bullet point list or a paragraph or a sectional structure. Here's the different approaches, 2 to 3, and this is your evaluation of each of them in their job of managing, maintaining quality. How effective do you think they ultimately are? 2.2 now is a similar thing, but here, rather than the general approaches for managing quality, we're going to look at particular tools and techniques used in quality management in a real organizational type of setting. And this is your chance to bring in things like critical analysis, SWOT analysis, root cause analysis, and fishbone analysis. You've got, oh crikey, there's so many things in here. Appreciative inquiry, diagnostic tools, yeah, Kano model. There's so many different things in here, different types of waste, PDCA cycles, or PDSA for some of you. This is where it's your chance to look at, again, a selection of different tools and techniques. I'd probably recommend you look at between 2 and 4 distinct different tools and techniques that are different from each other. Evaluate each of them in a very similar fashion to what I outlined for 2.1. But here it's very much around how do those tools and techniques actually work in a real organizational setting is the key thing to evaluate. And again, bring some lived experience in if you want to do, or use some case studies if you want to do, just to try and flesh that out. So it's not just an opinion piece, it's opinion based on kind of data information. Moving on to learning outcome 3, justify the use of short and long-term strategies for continuous improvement. It says here that short-term could be big steps, breakthrough, high risk, innovative approaches here for continuous improvement. Long-term might be more incremental, slow, deliberate, minimizing of risk, managing risk on a tighter leash. Here again, this would lend itself to a 2-paragraph or 2 sections approach, one specifically for short-term strategies, one for long-term, and you're going to justify their use. Okay, so this would be for you to provide a rationale for those actions or decisions. What's the rationale for short-term and the rationale for long-term? Ideally, you've got some experience to back that up or any research or anything else that might help you. So looking at, I guess, more of a tactical and more strategic plays in continuous improvement, what do you think? What's the you justifying the use of both, either or, in an organizational context? 3.2, then we're going to evaluate the process for embedding continuous improvement within an organizational setting. Here it would make sense to think around your own organization or a specific organization. And how do we make continuous improvement embedded? So identifying gaps, problems, building on successes, looking at customer needs, maybe looking at our strategic objectives and see how that marries into what we're actually doing day to day. Okay, stakeholder management, collection and monitoring, reporting of data information as we go. Yep, telling success stories, maintaining momentum, all that kind of stuff. How do we embed it and make sure continuous improvement is part of what we do? What's the process we're going to try and put in place? Do we do, for example, prototyping before we roll the whole thing out? Or do we try and catch the whole thing in one? What's your view on that process for embedding it within your organization? Where does it work? Where does it not work? What could you sort of suggest could be done to improve that process? With a process to a question like this, it can be nice just to map the process out, just like a graphic or something, and then just evaluate that process. How could that process itself as a structure, do you think maybe be improved is usually a good approach here? And finally, learning outcome 4, know how to judge the success of quality management now. 4.1 is to discuss how the effectiveness of quality management within an organizational context can be assessed. So again, we're back into results and metrics, standards, business impact, levels of waste, how our policies are actually working, procedures and processes around that. I'd be tempted here to talk about, if you have anything around that, about how we improve the way we improve. So what feedback mechanisms do we have in there? Do we have something that actually, challenges our modus operandi? Or are we just frantically running around wagging tails and hoping that kind of works? So what do we have in there that actually, subverts that and shakes the cage a little bit? A discussion means that we're going to have a range of different opinions on that effectiveness. You don't have to come to a judgment here. It's not an evaluate, but discuss does mean can you bring in different contrasting views on the thing, just to look at that effectiveness of how we do that within the organizational context and its assessment. And finally, evaluate the use and purpose of a scorecard method to judge the success of quality management. So this is our scorecard method. So you want to really select one, whether that's balanced scorecard from Kaplan Norton or the EFQM or something similar to that. And what we're going to try to do is identify both what this thing's there for. What do you think the scorecard method is used for? And how effective do you think it is in judging the success of quality management? This is the key thing. So what's it for and how good do you think it is in that job of judging the success of quality management? So that will be pros and cons, strengths and weaknesses, resource implications, where it has maybe areas to be aware of, all that kind of stuff will come into there. And that is all of the assignment there. So a very quick whip around, but hopefully that's been helpful just to focus your attention, if nothing else, on the command verbs here. Again, just to summarize, this is an evaluate heavy assignment. So to make sure you've got on most of those, well, all those evaluate questions, a point of judgment at the end. Say, this is what you really think.
Thank you very much, James. If you do have any other questions, feel free to contact us on cmi@inpd.co.uk, and we look forward to receiving your assignments very soon. Thank you very much.